We'll call the meeting of the Minot City Council to order today for Monday, August 3rd, 2020. It is 5:30. I want to thank everyone for attending today, both in person and online. I would ask that anyone who has cell phones or other electronic devices to make sure that they are on silent mode or vibrate to keep the distractions down to a minimum. Roll call, please.
Evans? Here. Janser?
Here.
Olson? Here. Pittner?
Here.
Padragula?
Here.
Ross?
Here.
Sitma?
Here. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 3 on the agenda this afternoon is the mayor's report. I did have a little bit of an abbreviated report this week due to the fact that I finally did take one full week and took a driving tour of Montana, social distancing out in the Rocky Mountains. So I will start my report here on July 14th, where I did attend Colonel Cochran's farewell social distancing picnic at Minot Air Force Base. On the 15th, I did have an eminent domain meeting with a homeowner. On the 16th, then was the one brand press conference. Also on the 16th was the chain of command ceremony at Minot Air Force Base, welcoming Colonel Michael Walters as the new commander of the 5th Bomb Wing. I had mentioned last week to Colonel Cochran, who had been the commander for 2 years at Minot Air Force Base, and all of the exceptional things that happened under his command. And certainly we are looking forward to Colonel Walters as well, whose call sign is, I just can't help but smile when I hear Chewie is his call sign. It's a Star Wars reference, if anybody didn't quite catch that. So once again, welcome to Colonel Michael Walters, 5th Bomb Wing Commander, Minot Air Force Base. Glad to have you. On the 16th, I did have a home acquisition closing. On the 17th, then, we did have a daycare providers discussion with legislators on some of the COVID restrictions. Then we had a series of special city council meetings as well as the regular city council meeting. On the 21st, we did have the Blue on Broadway groundbreaking. Did a radio interview on the 22nd. We did have an emergency daycare follow-up meeting with Minot Public Schools on the 23rd. On the 25th, I ate more tacos than I care to admit for judging Taco Fest. Very welcome event in downtown Minot. CTE, not CTI meeting, as my spell check didn't quite catch that one. Special meeting on the 29th, and then the 30th was COVID-19 task force within the city. And then I did run the census kiosk at Marketplace Foods on Friday. I know a number of aldermen and alderwomen have done some of the different turns at running the kiosk. I actually did run into 5 people during my 2-hour shift that adamantly did not want to take the census, even after discussing all that it really does mean for our community. I'm also very happy to report that a number of our volunteers have signed up quite a few people that have not taken the census, and I was just told before the meeting that some of the people actually were coming to the kiosks so that people wouldn't be knocking on their doors from some of the census workers. So as a reminder to all of the folks listening at home is that if you've not filled out your census, the census workers with their face gear will be walking around for anyone who has not filled it out. But we will have our kiosks around that are sanitized between each person, and most of them, I believe, are at Marketplace Foods. So there is your opportunity to participate, and I certainly would want to encourage anyone and everyone to do that because the benefits that it will have on the community. If you don't know what those are, we'll be more than happy to send you, if you want to email any one of us, the information on that. August 3rd today, not the 1st, we did have a ribbon cutting at Interbase for the electric recharge station, both with Interbase and Verendrye Electric for the first Class 3 electric car recharge station in Minot. So we are joining Fargo and Bismarck as a very few communities that have those fast recharge stations within their community. That is the extent of most of my meetings and other activities. And Dave, I've got one more thing before we turn to you here, so I just need a couple minutes on that. I did have a number of other phone calls, emails, and social media events and other staff interactions, and I would look for any questions if anybody has any of me before I move on to my final piece before we get into our city manager's report. If not, just recently on social media, there was a post that really caught my eye, and I wanted to kind of bring attention to everyone else's attention in case you haven't seen it. And I'll look to Derek to press start on here, because Lord knows my clicker. So it's not too often that we get the opportunity to say, you know, really a job well done for going above and beyond, but I wanted to take a moment to recognize Chris Simonson. If you want to come up here, Chris, and we'll stand our 6 feet apart here. I'll stand back a little bit, but it says a lot for doing more than just the day-to-day job, and I greatly appreciate that for someone like Brex, who on his 3rd birthday was just hoping to meet a man who runs a big piece of machinery that he thinks is absolutely awesome. So for those of you who don't know Chris, he started with Minot May 7th, 2013, as basically a laborer, and worked his way on up to heavy equipment operator, and now runs one of the big sanitation trucks with the automation that we see each and every day. And like I said, when we get to make a special effort above and beyond, we have to say thank you. So I did sanitize my hand, I did sanitize the coin, and I want to say thank you, Chris, for going above and beyond on behalf of the city, and probably making a lifelong friend from a 3-year-old that who will never, ever forget it. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That is the city. That's presented to anybody that we feel that is going above and beyond. That's actually the mayor's coin that shows the provide, power, and protect, as well as the mayoral. So I don't know if you want to say a little bit about how that all came to be. I'll bring you up to the microphone.
A lot of pressure here. No, it's an honor. I mean, I love work for the city of Minot. There's other kids that come out and, you know, they'll have me honk the horn and things like this. And when I first saw Brex, he was wearing like a garbage man shirt, and I know he was crazy about like garbage trucks and all that. And so I got out, I tried showing him what I could. He looked a little nervous, but, and then he'll still come out and I'll kind of tip the can and whatnot. But yeah, it's been an honor. I don't know much more. I'm not great with words. So. But thank you very much.
No, thank you, Chris. Thank you. That's why I had to come up and say thank you, because it means going above and beyond, and we do greatly appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you being here. And that does conclude my report, and with that, we'll turn it over to our acting city manager, Mr. David Lakefield, for his report for tonight.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's not really fair to have to follow that up with exciting finance, city manager duty stuff, but we'll try and keep it short. We have some exciting discussion to talk about later with the preliminary budgets. We're going to move through this rather quickly and get on to the fun stuff. Some things coming up, the standard monthly activities here. Planning Commission at the City Hall here tomorrow at 5:30. Service River Joint Board Thursday at 4 o'clock at the auditorium. The budget Q&A coming up here in council chambers on August 17th. Water Topics Committee August 19th and 20th. We're really excited to have those folks here in town, provided that they are able to travel and be able to show them some of the progress that we have on our water projects here in the city of Minot, and start discussions about the upcoming projects. Chamber Board meeting on August 18th, and again, City Council here again on August 17th. All right, some project updates. We're going to move through this pretty quickly. A lot going on around town. The National Disaster Resiliency Competition, as you all know, there was a substantial amendment that was submitted that has been approved. That allows us to move some of those funding buckets around to different projects. The City Hall will now stand at $7.7 million, and the CTE program will be at $3.54 million in total. Some more NDR action going on. Recently had the groundbreaking for the Blue on Broadway project on South Broadway. And so we're making progress there. And if you've driven by, you can see that there's concrete foundations and walls already poured, and they're beginning backfilling. They've been very good at keeping us apprised of their progress. Every week we get a progress report from them showing what activity is taking place and what's anticipated to be on the schedule for the following week. And we've had some good weather, so they've made a lot of time. Some construction. And I like Derek's superhero theme here, but it seems to take a long time to load up here. So 31st Avenue reconstruction, the roundabout's open for traffic. The construction has progressed further west on 31st Avenue. I've been through the roundabout several times. Traffic really seems to be flowing smoothly. And I think with a little practice, if you go through there a few times, everybody will be adept at it. And I think before long, that will be, there won't be any anxiety, and we'll keep that traffic moving smoothly. Storm sewer work on 31st Avenue and 10th Street has had some traffic blocked there. Now I think the 28th Avenue is open again, so there are still some detours, but they're making progress. A little bit of a delay due to some of the rains that we did have with that trench being opened up, but they're continuing to make progress.
Okay.
All right.
It's taken about 48 hours for me to actually work up the courage, but today I'm going to give up my body and my soul for the
can't hear
sake
this,
of
Derek.
science. Probably for the best. I'm gonna do it. Today, we're gonna try our first roundabout. I got this. Okay, here we go. We're approaching it. Blinker, yield, blinker, done. No problem. Man, there's other cars here. Didn't think there'd be other cars. All right. Blinker, check. Yield for traffic, check. We got this. We got this. Look for your exit. Okay, blinker, check. Safely escape without harm. Check.
All right. I don't know how much anxiety we instilled on that, but I'm not sure how many times he had to go around the circle either. So 10th Street storm sewer project, a little bit behind schedule. All the storm sewer is now installed at the intersection of 10th Street and 31st Avenue. All the businesses impacted remained open and accessible, and they're working on the paving this week, and the installation will continue to move south. Flood control. Working on the staining on the phases along Broadway or to the east of Broadway there. At the pump station, the Broadway pump station, they're installing the roof. And at 3rd Street and 4th and 5th Avenue, they're installing signal lights coming here in the middle of the month. And they may have to close the intersection temporarily. Phase is about, I guess I don't have a percentage. Phase MI23 is about 98% complete. They're finishing up along Wee Links at the parking lot and the walking path and placing some topsoil. They should be done here later in the month. So making a lot of progress due to the good weather there. This is a map showing some of the general maintenance and repairs, chip seal, patches, and overlays. So kind of spread throughout the city. It seems like the work has been progressing very quickly. They're doing a quality job and getting a good product here at the end of the day. Additional areas of town show some of the process there. One of the things they've done here in the last year or two is going back after the rocks have been down and fog sealing the coating. It gives it that nice dark black covering and helps keep the rocks in place. So we're seeing a little bit better results due to doing that. Again, more street repairs. Mill and overlay on East Street Northwest from 21st to 30th Avenues should be complete by August 11th. And again, more patching, chip sealing, things continue to move in that part of town as well. All right, the spoiler alert, and this is the preview. This is the cover page of the preliminary budget that will be presented here later on in the meeting, and you should have a copy on your desk. Try not to read ahead here because you might get confused. We have a number of things to point out to you, but we'll try and keep that presentation short and sweet. And we're going to give you a little bit of an insight or sneak peek on some of the technology that we have with our new computer system and how we can look at some of the data too. So hopefully we have all the bugs worked out of that, so we get that to work here in a little bit as well. The highlights: zero increase in the mill levy rate and zero increase in utility rates is anticipated as well. To be continued at later in the meeting. Staff operations and updates. The hazardous waste collection, household hazardous waste collection, and the free dump week totals. You can see here compared to prior years. And obviously this was postponed due to the pandemic, but it looks like the attendance and the results were very good. So we'll continue to evaluate this project or program in the future and continue on with that. Some additional details: numbers of cars. The first chart was the pounds or gallons of waste collected. Not quite a record, but definitely a strong showing. We had a retirement from the police department as well as 2 promotions last week. Lieutenant Scott Redding has retired as a lieutenant after serving the city for more than 30 years. And after his departure, Sergeant Darren Dyke was promoted to lieutenant. He began with the city in 1998, was promoted to sergeant in 2011, and he will move to patrol as shift commander, and I think he'll be on the night shift. Master Patrolman Cole Strandemo was promoted to sergeant. He started in 2011, was promoted to senior officer in 2015, and later promoted to master officer, and he will move to admin and community outreach unit. And that is it for the city manager's report. We will be continued when we present the preliminary budget, but if you have any questions, I'd gladly answer those at this
Thank you,
time.
Mr. Lakefield. Any questions for our acting city manager? If not, thank you, sir. That takes care of number 4. Number 5 on our agenda is the city attorney's report.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I submitted a written report. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for our city attorney? Thank you, Kelly. That takes us on to number 6, which is our consent items. We have 12 different items within our consent agenda. Are there any individual items that need to be pulled for individual discussion? If not, all of them will be passed with recommendations by staff or as presented within recommendations. For a note, there is 6.12, which is an item that is contingent upon approval of 7.3's approval. So I would ask if there is a motion maker to also include that 6.12 be contingent upon the approval of 7.3 in tonight's agenda. Seeing no item for individual discussion, I would look for a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Alderman Ross with the caveat of contingent of 6.12 on 7.3. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That is done with number 6. Then on to 7. The action items. First one is 7.1, a supper club license. American Multi-Cinema Incorporated, doing business as AMC Dakota Square 9. City received a request from the American Multi-Cinema Inc., doing business as AMC Dakota Square 9, for a supper club license operating at 2400 10th Street Southwest, Suite 604. All documentations and inspections relating to the proposed premise have been approved by the police chief, building officials, and fire marshal. The liquor, beer, and wine at an establishment is defined as a supper club under Section 5.1. I'm sorry, I skipped a line here. The city's supper club license, City of Minot Code of Ordinances, Section 5.16. Subsection 6 allows for the on-sale of liquor, beer, and wine at an establishment defined as a supper club under Section 5.1, subsection 17 of the Code of Ordinances. There's two differing recommendations here. Number one is if the City Council agrees to that the AMC Theater is primarily operating as a restaurant, it is recommended the City Council approve the request from the American Multi-Cinema Incorporated, doing business as AMC Dakota Square 9, for a supper club license operating at 2400 10th Street Southwest, Suite 604. Or, City Council does not agree that the AMC Theater is primarily operating as a restaurant. It is recommended that the City Council deny the request from the American Multi-Cinema Inc., doing business as AMC Dakota Square 9, for a supper club license operating at 2400 10th Street Southwest, Suite 604. Alderwoman Evans.
I would like to make a motion to postpone this until our August 17th meeting, or if we have a special meeting before that, and direct our city attorney to work on a revision of the Minot Code of Ordinances, so that we can find a way to be consistent with state law and our city code of ordinances, as well as, helping AMC with this desired result.
We have a motion to hold for August 17th and direction for reworking of ordinance.
Second?
Second by Alderman Padragula. And I believe this is open for discussion. It is not a motion to table, it is a motion to hold. So discussion. Alderman Padragula.
I have no problem with granting this. I just think it's, they're operating as a theater. I think it would be kind of a distortion to say they're operating as a restaurant primarily. I think if they change the wording on that, I think it was option B that their attorney presented, I'm fine with that. But it seems kind of odd to kind of label them a restaurant when they're primarily movie theater, apparently. And they were amenable to that in the attorney's letter.
Further discussion. Alderwoman Olson.
Mr. Mayor, I think that there's been some discussion that there could be an option of a cinema or a theater recognition instead of it being a supper club, and just identifying it more succinctly than calling it a supper club. So that would be some of the direction for the city attorney to bring back to us.
Thank you. Madam City Attorney.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I think what would be contemplated would be to have a movie theater type license with some type of restaurant component so that they can allow minors or underage people to be on the premises. And so then they would have a food sale obligation for at least as, I think it's gross sales, at least equal to the gross sale of food, at least equal to the gross sales of alcoholic beverages. So we could figure out how that can work, but the primary function would not necessarily be restaurant. So that's what I'm envisioning, as long as that's what the council.
Thank you, Kelly. And looking through all of the memos and then the emails as well, and I think that was somewhat contemplative as far as changes. Looking back to 2016, when we initially went through all of the liquor licenses and rewrites, surprisingly, this was not one that entered into the equation. But I'm certainly open for discussion, is taking a look, as a lot of other areas around the country have done the same very responsibly. Certainly, we'll wait to see what that language looks like. Alderman Janser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support this motion. I think it's a way for us to go forward. I do have some slight concern that I don't know what the plans were of the theater or the timing of their reopening or whatever, and I would hope that we would be able to accommodate that whatever it is as we move forward with the item.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman Evans.
Alderman Janser, that's why I put the provision in the motion that our next meeting, so if we get a special meeting, for other issues before August 17th, we can have the first reading then. The rate we're going to special meetings, we probably will have a special meeting by then. So we may even be able to have the second reading and approval at the August 17th meeting. I hope that works, but that's the best, with the notice requirements and stuff we have to do. So hopefully that, works for our business, and we'll move it as long as expediently as we can.
Certainly.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to hold until the August 17th with direction to rework the ordinance with what is applicable to meet local and state requirements. Please call the roll.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma.
Yes. Motion is approved. 7.2 is concur on a purchase price for flood buyout at 1416 First Avenue Southeast for $160,000. The City of Minot policy and procedures for involuntary acquisition include a provision that any negotiation purchase price for flood buyouts under these guidelines, where the purchase price exceeds 15% and $15,000 from the initial purchase price offer made by the city, shall go to the City Council for closing before a closing can take place. The independent appraisal value originally set for this property was $130,000, which per federal requirement was the initial offer made for to the property owner. As a result of successful negotiations with the property owner in this manner, we have reached an agreement for a purchase price of $160,000, which is 23% above the initial offer and exceeds the $15,000 from the original offer. The recommendation to City Council is to concur with the negotiated purchase price of the property owner for flood buyout acquisition 1416 First Avenue Southeast for $160,000.
So moved.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson.
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.3, this is to approve the development agreement with Beyond Shelter, Inc. for the 54 LMI senior citizen rental units. In mid-2019, the City Council approved a resolution tentatively allocating up to $5.5 million in CDBG DR funds necessary for the partial financing construction of 54 of senior citizen LMI housing by Beyond Shelter Incorporated, condition on Beyond Shelter Inc. for securing leverage financing for the balance of the project. Beyond Shelter Inc. has successfully secured the leverage financing through the allocation of low-income housing tax credits and grants from the state of North Dakota sources, with a value for share of construction of $4.75 million. The recommendation to the City Council is to approve and authorize the mayor and finance director to execute the development agreement with Beyond Shelter, Inc. for construction of 54 units senior citizen LMI rental housing.
So moved.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson. Is there a second? Second by Alderwoman Evans. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion on the motion? I would only add that as one of those with some of the discussion leading up to this with the 54 units of the senior citizen LMI, I think we had great discussion in this in terms of need, and also I think this shows another successful aspect of the federal grant dollars going to good work for the folks that do have certain need within our community. Seeing no further comment, please call roll.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser.
Yes.
Motion is approved. 7.4, term limits. At the June 20th, 2020 regular City Council meeting, the City Council approved a motion directing the City Attorney to draft an ordinance to implement term limits for City Council members. A motion directed the draft ordinance to be based off of the City of Fargo's ordinance relating to term limits. Attached is a draft ordinance implementing term limits for the City Council members. The language is identical to Fargo's ordinance, with the exception of the date in subsection D that is left blank so the City Council members can discuss what date, if any, is appropriate. The recommendation is to consider the draft ordinance on first reading relating to the term limits for City Council members.
Mr. Mayor, I move
Yes, Alderman Ross.
we approve the ordinance as written,
We have
the date of June 2020. June 9, 2020.
June 9th, 2020. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Pittner. Discussion. Discussion on the motion. Alderwoman Olson.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I shared my opinion on this a few weeks ago when we discussed it. I have a lot of concerns with it. Some are related to research that has been done in the past that shows that term limits actually impede a woman's ability to be elected or impedes a woman's decision even to seek elected office. So I've been a proponent of women running for elected office, and for that reason, I would not support it. But more importantly than that, I think that we're taking away people's choice. We have term limits, and it's left up to the voters every 2 years. And if we take away that choice, I think we're making a mistake. I think it's up to the voters to determine how long someone should be sitting in one of these seats.
Alderwoman Evans.
I'd like to make a subsidiary motion to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
Motion to postpone indefinitely, and I would have to look to our city attorney in Robert's Rules of Order.
Mr. Mayor, that would take precedent
That
over
would
the
take-
main motion, and it's debatable.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Didn't hear.
Motion to postpone indefinitely.
What did she say?
That it is a precedent motion, and it is open for discussion, if there is a second.
Second.
Second by Alderwoman Olson. Discussion on the motion to postpone indefinitely.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Ross.
I can't support the motion to postpone. I think we're elected as council members to vote and take action. Pushing this indefinitely is not taking any action at all. We can always vote it down, and by postponing it indefinitely, it takes the right away to do that.
Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Pittner.
Thank you. I agree with Mr. Alderman Ross. I think this is something that we can discuss, and we as council members have the right to vote either for or against. I've read some of the research that Alderwoman Olson has sent to the council, and my takeaway from a lot of that research was that I don't want to say I'm disagreeing with Alderwoman Olson. I think by implementing term limits, what I took from the research was that does not lead to more women or minorities running for council or elected positions, but it doesn't do everything. It has to be coupled with not only term limits, but also campaigning or recruitment of women and minorities into the election field. So I think we as a council, this is the first step we can take to bring more people in, and then we have to invite people to the table, invite people to run, encourage people to run, and support them when they make that decision. So I'm not in favor of postponing indefinitely. I think we can vote on this up or down at this meeting.
Alderwoman Evans.
So I'd like to expand sort of on my thoughts on this. I feel like Alderman Padragula, I have a few points. One is, I really think this is a solution in search of a problem. I look around and I don't see a lot of entrenched elected officials on this body that, we need to sort of get new things in. Second is the electoral change that the city underwent a few years ago, making the council 14 to 7. Part of the reasoning for that and making it citywide was to get a better group of candidates to the mix. I think we've had, a couple of elections to see that this seems to be working. This last election, there was 5 of us who ran for 3 seats. I think it's very telling that if the voters indeed were concerned about entrenched politicians, then I don't think Alderman Padragula would have been reelected. No, he's an incumbent and could have been, I don't know what your contiguous service is, but, could have been term limited out, I'm not sure. But voters had the opportunity. There was 2 other candidates they could have voted for instead of Alderman Padragula, and they did not. So until there is evidence that this is a problem and that our current system does not work, in 2 years we will have 3 additional council members up for election. We certainly will have, I am confident, a good candidate pool once again. If people do not, and I don't know if they're running for re-election, want to see, Alderwoman Olson or Alderman Janser, serve another term, then the voters will cast their vote accordingly. But I do believe democracy seems to be working fine in Minot, and am not comfortable changing this at this time.
Alderman Padragula.
I also, like Alderman Ross, feel we should vote one way or the other, so I'll be opposing the motion to postpone. I do want to share my thoughts about the idea of term limits. Like Carrie said, I think it's a solution in search of a problem. I agree very much that we've had a substantial turnover on the council. I think the Make Minot movement has succeeded remarkably well. We have had a very good pool of candidates, in my estimation, probably the best we've ever had. My primary reason for opposing it is I think it does take away from the rights of the people, from the rights of the voters. If people want to have someone serve a long time, they can certainly have them do that. And I think in North Dakota we have a long tradition of electing people to offices, and if they do a good job, supporting them. Best examples, I think, at the federal level would be Senator Burdick, who served 32 years. Senator Young, a Republican. Burdick was a Democrat, an NPL, or I guess more of an NPL than a Democrat. Senator Young served 36 years. Both Congressman Pomeroy and Congressman Andrews served 18 years, or 9 terms apiece. We've had substantial turnover on the council over the years. I don't know that anybody's served a humongous period of time, at least nobody that's on here. And in terms of, the voter's choice and being term limited, I think I'm the best example of that. I've run for office over 20-some years on several occasions. I've been elected 5 times, and I've been unelected or not elected 3 times. So the voters have certainly exercised their wisdom in kicking me out or not bring me back, but there are other times when they have brought me back, and I think they should have that freedom. I think also there are times when things change in the city where we have some major event like the flood, or somebody leaves the council for whatever reason, and I think we need to be able to give the voters the opportunity to bring somebody back before their next round would be, if they see a need for that set of skills or that personality or that gender or whatever to be on the council. So I think that limits them. There are times when we might want to have a more representative, more diverse council, and this would keep us from bringing somebody back for at least another couple years that we might want to bring back. So for all those reasons, I'm not in favor of a term limit ordinance because, again, we have the best kind of term limits I think we can have, and that's called an election.
Further discussion? Certainly, this is an opportunity for anybody. I see a former alderman sitting in the audience. If anybody does want to come forward and share their thoughts on the proposal that is before us, I would certainly welcome that as well. I'm not putting pressure on anybody by any means, but my thoughts on it are a little bit kind of, I don't want to say riding the fence, but it is kind of the double-edged sword in some cases. You take a look at a lot of the discussions nationally about term limits, and I don't think that we can make that applicable to here. I don't think that same type of issue exists here. I think in agreements, the Make Minot movement, there was a significant change, significant turnover, and also the ability to create, I think, a better pool, as you had pointed out, in having the at-large system, where anybody in any part of the city can run, no matter whether or not that their ward was up for election or not. I take a look at the longest-serving mayor of Minot, who at one point I worked for a brief period of time, former Mayor Chet Wrighton, who actually served unconsecutively as he was voted out in one term and then came back to finish out what was a remainder of his last term of 2 years. I certainly can appreciate some folks' thought on the need for a term limit if in fact that there happens to be a substantial problem where inactivity and folks that weren't doing the job, and in many cases I look at the election system as being the cure to that locally. We've got a lot more engagement locally, I think, than we have ever had in the past, good, bad, or otherwise. And I'm very happy to see that the number of candidates that have run for different positions, and certainly hope to see that moving forward. I'm not going to support the proposal to postpone indefinitely, but I don't think I'll be supporting the term limit resolution either. And certainly by not postponing indefinitely, that is something that if it does become a problem later on, can certainly be brought back for consideration. Any further discussion? Alderwoman Evans.
I would like to withdraw my motion to postpone indefinitely and have a vote on Alderman Ross's motion.
Does the second agree?
Yes.
Motion has been withdrawn. Back to the original motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Ross.
I'm going to support the motion for term limits. I think it's part of our responsibility as council members to, I guess, kind of recruit and open the door. I think it sends a message to our citizens that, we're willing to step aside at some point, that we're not career politicians, that we're not going to be a part of what I hear on social media as the good old boy club. I think the Make Minot, I think one of their standards or one of their pillars was to encourage and promote involvement in city government. And, I would think after, if term limits are passed, which it doesn't sound like it's going to happen, but if term limits are passed, I would welcome somebody who would want to step into my shoes at the end of my term, not because I'm not doing a good job, or because they want to continue the work that I did or that I was doing. I don't want to be on here for a career. I don't. And I don't think any of us should. We've got, hopefully the census is going to say we've got 50,000 residents in the city of Minot. Voting in term limits sends them a message. Following up with the work of the council to encourage people to become active and to participate in it. Hey, look, I'll talk to a high school class, I'll talk to a college class, I'll talk to a church group and talk to them about the benefits of serving on city council. But I think one of those precursors of going in there saying, look, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to sit through 3 terms or 4 terms. I think it's 12 years total is what the ordinance is. If I'm lucky enough, yeah, maybe, but I don't, I just think it sends a good message to the citizens of Minot that we are, that we're willing to step aside for 4 years and let someone else come in and see their views and see how they can do it. So that's where I stand.
Alderwoman Olson.
Just in response to Alderman Ross, I'm not sure if Alderman Ross and some of the people in the audience are aware that we do have a group in Minot called Women Lead, Women Run, where we do exactly what you're referencing. We encourage women to run for public office or to be involved in a campaign. And it has resulted in candidates and elected officials in different levels in our community, so we're proud of that.
Any further discussion?
Mayor,
Alderman Pittner.
thank you, Mayor. I'll give my 2 cents on this. Again, I'm going to fall in line with Alderman Ross, I believe, on this. The way that I view it, and again, I'm trying to make this applicable to my everyday life. Even with children or whatnot, I can hold my kid's hand. I can do the job for them their entire lives if I want, and never step aside. But I think it's best if at some point I get out of the way and let them learn and allow them to take the driver's seat, if you will, allow them to take charge of our community. Because eventually I might not know what's best. And I'm going to support this motion because I think it is best to get out of the way sometimes and let someone else have the opportunity to step up. Just my thoughts.
Any further discussion? Alderman Janser.
I guess I would just point out that there's nothing that requires an alderman to run for re-election if, in fact, they feel like they ought to get out of the way and let somebody else jump in. And by establishing term limits where people have to leave, whether it's an alderman or whether it's a mayor who's been an alderman and then can't run for re-election because he or she has reached the limit, I think that's restrictive. There is no guarantee that by making people leave office that you get better people that will step up and run. That you might, but you might not. And so, I'm not in favor of the term limit approach, and so I'll be supporting I'll be voting no on.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion is to approve the term limit resolution on first reading. Please call the roll.
Ross,
Yes.
Sitma,
No.
Evans,
No.
Janser,
No.
Olson,
No.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padrigula.
No.
Motion fails. That is the end of our action items. That takes us to number 8, which is personal appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to come forward and speak on any item that is either on or not on our agenda for this evening. I would ask that if you do come forward to just state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes, or if needed, more, to talk about whatever it is that you would want. Last call on personal appearances. All right. We will move on to the miscellaneous and discussion items. 9.1 is our preliminary budget presentation from our finance director, acting city manager, Mr. David Lakefield.
Good evening once again, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Again, we're going to keep this pretty short, but we're going to hit some of the highlights, and you should have a copy of the preliminary budget in front of you. A lot of hard work went into the preparation, not only from the finance staff, but from city departments all across the city. We had some challenges in front of us immediately, and we knew that going into the budget cycle. We faced some revenue challenges, and our goal was to present a budget that was balanced and had a zero rate increase on the mill levy. And what we are presenting today has accomplished that. So we'll hit some of the highlights and walk you through some of this. And obviously, we'll entertain questions as you have an opportunity to review that. And the Q&A session will be here in 2 weeks. So we'll dive into more detail at that time. Mill valuation, we're fortunate to have a slight increase in valuations over 2020. The 2020 valuation was just over $207 million, meaning that one mill would raise $207,607 and change. In 2021, that rose to $212,560,000. It's roughly a 2% increase. So in 2021, the same mill rate generated just about 2% in additional general property tax revenue. So about 2.4% it says here. And part of that was based on the 2020 number that was used here was the actual mill levy and not the budgeted mill levy. So sometimes there's a slight difference. The rate in 2020 was 121.29 mills, and that is also the rate for the 2021 budget. So 0% change. The budget, here we get into some of the big numbers. The total budget in 2020 was $273.3 million. The 2021 proposed budget was $143.5 million, a change of $129.7 million, or just about 48% decrease. Now, again, that looks like a tremendous undertaking, and I'd love to take credit for those big numbers. Some of that is due to a change in how we account for state funds and large projects like NAS and flood control, acquisitions, highway projects, those types of things. So that made up a bulk of that change. There were some other cuts that we made in response to the climate that we're in and capital projects, those types of things, but the bulk of that was just due to a change. And we'll get into some of the details here. Again, removal of the funding not flowing through the city, $26.3 million for flood control, $21.4 million for NAS, and then capital flood control is another $30.5 million. We reduced the number of infrastructure projects, decreasing $18.1 million. And that's $9.4 million from the 31st Avenue project. So that was a project that was budgeted in the 2020 budget. It's a big project. We don't have a sizable project like that anticipated in 2021. So it looks like we reduced the budget. We just didn't have that project to fund in the 2021 budget. $7.2 million from acquisitions. Part of the reason that we're seeing a decrease there is we have acquired a bulk of the property that's required for the current phases of flood control. We have other phases in the future, but they're a little ways out yet. So part of it is just timing, and we're in a little bit of a lull in acquisitions due to some of the delays with the MI5 project. Water, city, or sewer, and storm sewer projects decreased $7.3 million. Storm Sewer District 123 was a reduction to $3.58 million. Again, that was a big project that we had in the 2020 budget, and we didn't have those sizable projects in 2021. Same thing with the water plant expansion. That project will hopefully be completed at the year end and the funding in place, so we don't have that expenditure in 2021. In the Southwest Water Tower, which is under construction right now, again, a sizable project, $3.9 million. And I think we're going to be caught up on water towers for a little while, too. Excuse me. We do have a project that's a sizable project, and that's in the 2021 budget, $2 million for water main upsizing in Broadway. So that's a sizable project that we're looking forward to. Another change you'll see in your budget booklets when you look through there is we no longer have a general and administrative department. And this was a department that was in place, and it kind of caught some of the expenditures that went through that weren't being allocated out to departments. So a good example is insurance. We allocated out the proportionate amount of insurance to our enterprise funds because we're required to do that. And we didn't allocate those costs out to our general fund departments. We paid for them through this general and admin department. And when we got looking at this, and we took the opportunity through this software project to change how some of these things were being done, to clean things up. And it gives us a little cleaner data. If somebody comes to us and asks us what it costs us to run a police department or a finance department or a fire department or the city council's office or city manager's office, we can get that data very easily from our software system. And if we really wanted to have accurate data, we would have had to gone to these other departments and piecemealed out what belonged to other departments and combine them. So hopefully this will make us more efficient, and we'll have cleaner data at the end of the day. Some of the other costs that are allocated out, again, are utilities, water, heat, lights, those types of things will be paid for out of each separate department's budgets. The cost of the financial audit will be included in one of the department's budgets. And then it says community facilities here, but these are actually community contributions for other types of things such as First District Health Unit, Commission on Aging, those types of things that we fund through our budget. So the total of that, the budget that we moved elsewhere was $6.3 million. It doesn't mean that we cut it. We just moved it from this department into each appropriate department. Another change to be noted is we got rid of the highway and infrastructure funds and moved those into the general fund. And the reason that we did that is they no longer met the definition to be considered a special revenue fund. So again, we took this opportunity to move those funds into the general fund. We kept them isolated so we knew exactly what that portion of the general fund was attributed to, and we're able to do that, but we no longer have a special revenue fund to account for those. What else? Street department budget. We've made a lot of progress in the last few years, increasing the amount that we allocate towards street maintenance and improvements. In this upcoming budget, we've increased that about $1 million. And if you look at your budget line item, the difference is actually around $645,000. And how we've accomplished the remainder of that is in the past, our engineering department has charged engineering fees as a percentage of these projects. And it gets billed out to that line item for the street improvements, but it flows through as revenue in the general fund. And we said, we're just offsetting costs in another department, and we're not going to go through that exercise. So the effect is that line item went up $635,000, but we will accomplish about $1 million more in street improvements in the upcoming year. And hopefully we'll start to see those efforts in upcoming pavement assessments. We do have 3 new positions proposed in the preliminary budget. The first is an intelligence analyst for the police department. The anticipated cost, $64,271. And the need for this position was demonstrated when the riots were taking place, and we had some of that activity taking place in North Dakota. And the disadvantage that we were at here in the city of Minot is some of these other large cities in North Dakota have people dedicated to mining for information and seeing what's out there and who's coming to town and what type of activity is to be expected. And we didn't have that resource. This is something that the police chief and at the time Captain Klug had been asking for a number of years, and we've never found a way to fund it in the budget. And we tried to squeeze it in here this year, and we're looking at if everything is accepted as presented, we'd have an additional body in the police department. The fire department, we have 1 additional FTE, and this is actually moving a part-time fire marshal to a full-time fire inspector. So a lower grade, but moving from a part-time employee to a full-time employee. So that's a change that adds additional FTE. And then also on the public works department, adding a full-time project manager, field design person. And this person would be helping to manage the huge load of public projects that we have going on. I think right now, this year, over $400 million in projects between flood control and NAS and our regular sewer and water and storm sewer projects. So again, some additional help to monitor the construction season and also help with the development of designs and specifications in the winter months. The highlights for the existing staff positions, the proposed budget includes step increases and anniversary increases, but does not have any provision for market adjustments. So when we went into this preparation of the budget, it was right at the height of the pandemic, and with all of the data that we had prepared or that Ms. Junt had prepared for the market, we felt that the data was not reliable. The conditions had changed tremendously, and it would be very difficult to justify the market adjustments due to the fluctuating market out there. So the pay plan proposed has the step and anniversary dates, but no market adjustments. The overall increase in the salaries in total for the city is about 1.9% across the board. And I'll show you some of the details here in a little bit when we look at the analysis of this. Revenue challenges, that's where the unknowns lie. This is our wonderful sales tax collections graph. You know, I'm not an economist, but if you can draw a trend line on there with any degree of certainty, I'd love to have a conversation with you. If we look at the 2020 collections, May was a terrible month for us. I believe the lowest month on the chart for the last 5 years, certainly the lowest collections for the month of May in those 5 years. And we moved on to June, which was the highest collections for the month of June in the 5 years. So the good news is we are trending right now at less than 3% behind where we were at this time last year and less than 3% behind where we had budgeted for the entire year. So at least at this point in time, it looks like we're on track to be very close to our estimates and above where our revised forecast was. So it's positive news. Of course, we'll want to see the next few months' collections to see if those numbers hold true as well. But a little bit of good news and hope for cause for some optimism. Some of the other revenue declines that we're anticipating from the 2020 budget to 2021, obviously state operating revenues. Primarily, some of this is coming through in the forms of grants or other cost-sharing mechanisms. State capital grants, cost share on some of our large projects. Sales tax revenue, the city gets a portion of the state sales tax revenues. And of course, with the anticipated decline in sales tax collections, we budgeted accordingly. We have been told that, it's a little bit contrary to conventional wisdom, but they're saying that we're anticipating a bit of a spike in sales tax collections due to the number of large ticket items that have been purchased, such as boats, cars, campers, RVs, all of those types of things, which we don't see on the city sales tax collections. But they caution us that it could be just a blip, and again, to be a little bit conservative. Hub City revenues, and we've talked about that a number of times. We revised our forecast for 2020 and also our projections for 2021. We continue to monitor the price of oil, and of course, price is just one component to the collections for that. Production is also a huge component. So the good news is the Hub City revenues that the city of Minot receives, a portion of that is in a bucket that is first to fill. So even though it's not guaranteed, that money will be available before any other spending out of that revenue stream. So some of that money that we will get before it's dished out anyplace else. Again, the associated anticipated declines in the 2021 budget. So the total of these major revenue sources, $8.4 million or 22.73%. Okay, some changes to the budget format, and I wanted to point these out before you get into too much detail. This budget was prepared with the new Jarvis software. And again, superintendents, department heads, assistants were phenomenal during this whole process. Went through some training sessions, and for the most part, they were able to dive in and to do things on their own. The feedback that we got is that it's very user-friendly. It is a lot more intuitive than our old system. It's a point and click and select things off a menu. It's not memorizing commands that you have to enter in and those types of things. So a lot of good information and the ability to add additional detail easily, attach things such as estimates or documents like that can be attached directly to the budget for reference later on. So we're really looking forward to that. The Chart of Accounts was updated to conform with the Government Finance Officers Association, their recommended format. And part of that is the organization of the accounts and specific accounts that they like to see in the Chart of Accounts. And by developing our Chart of Accounts to accommodate that, it allows us to be comparable to other cities across the nation. Some of these accounts, the result that you will see in the budget book is that it gives us more detail. For example, our operations supplies was, for the lack of a better term, kind of a catch-all. It was a very broad category that we had in the past, and now you will see a lot more detail in those. So when you look in your budget book, you may see a line item from last year that has a number in there and no corresponding amount in the 2021, but then there may be a bunch of accounts below that that have an amount in 2021 and nothing in 2020, and that's due to the change in the account structure. So sometimes it's pretty obvious. When you look at them, it's easy to make that connection, and other times it's a little bit more hidden. So if you have questions when you're going through the booklet, feel free to reach out to us and we can walk you through that. So one of the benefits from these changes is to allow for additional detail in the budget and break down some of those large categories. And it's also going to give us some improved analytics. So if I can get this to work, Derek promised me it'll work just fine. I'm just going to give you a little quick tour. Perfect. Okay. So this screen here, this is something called a cube that we can export data from the database into an Excel spreadsheet. And then we can select fields off of here and we can slice and dice this information in a multitude of different ways and drill down into it. So the effect that this has is if you have somebody that's familiar with a spreadsheet, we can send this information out there and you can look at this in a number of different ways. And I'll just back up one step here and uncheck this box. So at this level, this is telling me the total expenses and total revenues for the city in the proposed budget for 2021. Now, when you look at this, it says it's a negative amount of the change, or the grand total shows an amount of $13 million. And that's because we had budgeted, or we are proposing using some reserves and funds that are dedicated for that purpose, such as NAWS or flood control or some of the sales tax funds that we have on hand. And we don't budget revenues for money that we have in the bank or that we already have in reserves. So when you look at that difference between the expense and revenues, that's where that is coming from. One of the big projects that we have that we're anticipating using reserves for is the City Hall project coming up. The good news, when you look at this, we're using $4 million less in reserves than we were in the 2020 budget. Again, it points out the $129 million decrease in the budget. So I can add the next layer on here, and this will show you the data at a high level. So for example, the next to the number 41 there, salaries, that's telling me the budgeted salaries for the entire city for 2020 versus 2021. And then you can build formulas. I had a different version of this spreadsheet where I converted it to how much of a mill that would equate to. I could build the formula to tell you how much of a change that would be to the average value house in the city of Minot. So there's a number of things that we can do to this. If you have questions, and I'm just going to pick on salaries here, I can click on that drop-down box. It gives me full-time, part-time, overtime. Again, total citywide. I can continue to drill down on that. And this is going to give me org codes, which is essentially departments. I'll back up. I'll click another department button here. I can look at this same basic information now in the salaries. It's going to break it down, full-time work performed, and then it'll be general fund, airport, cemetery, parking authority, on down the line. I can drill down on the general fund. It'll tell me general government, public safety, and highways and streets. And continue to drill down. So it'll tell me police, narcotics, dispatch, fire, and so forth. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a sneak peek here. I'm not going to go through the entire budget on here, but this is something that us number geeks, and we can slice and dice numbers and look at things. And it's information that is critical for us to have at our fingertips. And it makes it very easy to get this information out. And we're really excited because we'll be able to put this information into a format that'll be, we think, easily understood by a layperson. And they can have access to some of this information and answer questions a little bit self-service. All right. It took a little longer than I was anticipating, but I would gladly stand for any questions that you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Lakefield. Before we get to the questions, I do want to say thank you to all of the hard work for the finance department, everybody that worked a lot of hours putting this together. I'm sure when we began, I know when we began this budgeting, even pre-work early this year, is that none of us saw what was coming to throw the switch on the tracks and completely change course on a lot of different items in COVID-19. And I realize we're trying to do the best we can with our crystal ball with sales tax revenues, also with oil revenues with direct impact to Hub City funding, and on how all of that is going to play out going forward. I know there's been a lot of work in this year's budget to save where we can as well. So thank you to all of the department heads and all of the employees for doing that, and also what we're doing our best with what we can for our premonitions of what 2021 will bring in terms of those revenues. This property tax itself is pretty well reliable in terms of what we know those costs are, but it's about half of where that sales tax revenue, other part of the equation, comes in. That's the difficult part, and I think that that's important for people at home to know as well. Last year we had anticipated about $10 million from our sales tax off of each penny, and this coming year we're anticipating from this at least at $8.5 million. So we are already projecting, or I should say our financial folks are projecting a little bit less than there. And there's a lot of other components that work into that, but it's really a very unique year, I guess, as we're trying to work through this budget and try to also analyze moving forward. I'll make one last comment on that. If we do find ourselves somehow in 2021 with a full rebound, and we can cross our fingers, knock on wood, and say a prayer, certainly that's where the budget amendments come in, and we can certainly pick up slack if we realize the revenues are above those projections. If it's below that, then we have other difficult decisions to make. So with that, questions for our finance director. Alderwoman Evans, I think you had kind of cued my attention right away.
Bear with me. So first of all, I know we have like the right people for the job. That like the glee that you and Sue Greenhack are showing when these tables and cubes and stuff come up, it's joyful to see. You know, that you are so geeky. I love that. Look at Sue. But no, it's really like the transformation, like from what you've shown me before we had and you guys worked with to what we're moving to is like amazing, and I think is going to make us such more nimble with our budget. So thank you I know you're still transitioning to it, but I'm glad, you know, you have smiles still on your face and are enjoying some of the fruits of the hard work. So, Mr. Lakefield, so we have the 40, let's say 47% decrease from 2020 to 21 budget. Okay, so some of it is from the removal of funding not flowing through the city anymore. And then the infrastructure projects you talked about, the 31st Street, those ones, are those ones that have started, or we just plan not to start them?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, those are projects that are under construction in this construction season. So
Okay.
they were funded in the 2020 budget, and we just don't have a project of that magnitude proposed in the 2021 budget. And these big road projects, especially when they have DOT funding, they're planned several years out.
Okay.
And we do have some that are on the horizon or upcoming that we'll be, trying to get DOT participation in. We just don't happen to have one in 2020. So we just wanted to point out there that although the staff worked very diligently to make this a palatable budget, there were some other things that helped us out as well.
So is there any project we're working on right now that is in this proposed budget that we have to stop working on or not proceed with?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, we had two large capital projects in the 2020 budget that were abandoned, so to speak, I guess, when the pandemic hit, because we knew that there was we anticipated a revenue shortfall. We included both of those projects in part back in the 2021 budget. And the rationale that we had, and we knew that we wouldn't be able to fund both projects in their entirety in 2021, at least with the revenue forecast that we had. And we thought about choosing one over the other, and that becomes a difficult scenario as well. So what we did, in partly an effort to be as flexible as possible, is we proposed funding a portion of both of those projects in the 2021 budget. Our thought process was that, we didn't want to get partway into a project and not have the revenue stream coming in like we anticipated, and we didn't want to be caught in that scenario. However, if things rebounded quicker than we anticipated for 2020, the current year, and that money was already appropriated in 2020, we could potentially accelerate one of these projects, again, funding allowing. So we felt that approach gave us the most flexibility without having to pit one project against the other. And if things turned around and were a lot better than we anticipated, we could potentially do both projects.
And can you remind us what those two projects are?
Mr. Mayor, Alderwoman Evans, that was the City Hall retaining wall and the Northwest Fire Station number 5.
I think that's all my questions for now, but I know how to.
That is also why someone indicated too that if we start seeing those revenues rebound, that we do have some ability to be flexible through budget amendments to move some of those projects if it is advantageous. If not, we're, I think, conservatively projecting in case they don't. I would also just remind everyone, and this goes for anyone in the community as well, as the budget comes out, please ask questions as we go through this process, because we've got, Mr. Lakefield, what is our timeline again for our final reading and second passage of our budget to meet state law?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we're proposing having the both readings of the budget here in late September. Our next step is a Q&A session at the next regular council meeting date in 2 weeks. So definitely have your questions prepared and ready for that. And then we go through the process, and we'll have first and second reading in September. And I believe the statutory deadline is, October 10th. So.
And with that, for a lot of the smaller questions, I would encourage you to reach out to our finance department or even department heads to ask questions if there's some things in there that don't quite make sense. I realize the software's come a long way. We still got a little ways to go, but it certainly helps time-wise to get some of the smaller questions out of the way. But certainly, we anticipate that Q&A session will happen here. And to the general public as well in the first reading, I would certainly ask to come with those questions ready. If they're exceptionally complex, perhaps reach out to alderman or maybe somebody within the city in the finance department to ask those questions ahead so that we can have preparations for an answer for you. And by all means, that first reading typically is where most of those questions, I realize in the last couple of years, some folks have come up on second reading. Certainly we'll entertain those as well, but I would certainly hope to get most of the large-scale portion of that out during the first reading.
And
Mr.
Mr. Mayor, a
Lakefield.
couple other items too, if I may. Some late breaking news here. Just immediately prior to this council meeting, we had a bond rating call with Moody's Investor Services in anticipation of issuing some bonds. A couple of different issues. One was a relatively small issue for a special assessment district for the 10th Street, 31st Avenue Storm Sewer Project that we talked about earlier. Another series of debt for flood control financing, around $7.5 million of that cost. And then also refunding bonds for some of the airport, the existing airport debt, to try to take advantage of some of the low interest rate environment that we have and save some money on that debt. So it's in essence refinancing some of that. The meeting was scheduled to be an hour long and it took us about 2 hours and 15 minutes. But I think very positive, good feedback at this point. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll have those ratings out and we'll go to market and we'll know where we're going to sit for interest rates for those debt issues. A couple other things, just today, as a matter of fact, the governor did a proposal to the Emergency Commission in the state of North Dakota, and I think it's got one more hurdle to go through. We're anticipating receiving some funding, and I believe it's a result of CARES Act funding issued through the state. And the proposal is to reimburse local governments for the cost of post-certified law enforcement officers from, I believe, in March through September, so about a 7-month period. So if that clears the final hurdles and gets approved and goes through, just the rough math right off the top of the head is about a $3 to $4 million funding vehicle to the city of Minot. So that's going to be important. That's definitely going to help replace some of that anticipated revenue loss. And the last thing, we had some communication from the governor's office today in relation to COVID-19 and some of the activities that the governor's office is taking on, and we continue to evaluate our response to that. It's a very dynamic situation, and as of this morning, it looked like we were aligned with the governor's approach and response, and some changes throughout the day, and we'll have to reevaluate our approach. One of the latest things that we're doing, and some of you may have had your temperature checked when you came in to the building tonight, but that's a precautionary measure that we're working on rolling out and getting the equipment to require temperature checks for folks to enter into the buildings. Again, it's not a cure-all or 100% success rate, but if we can, again, mitigate some of these factors before we have a large group of people, we're going to attempt to do that, and at a relatively low cost. So we continue to monitor that. The COVID results and how that plays out is definitely going to have an impact on us citywide as far as the revenue side of things goes. So we watch that on a daily basis, and hopefully we can move forward and things will turn around sooner than expected.
Thank you, Mr. Lakefield. Any final questions? If not, we will reserve a lot of the tough Q&A for the next Q&A session on it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Alderman Pittner.
Thank you. Dave, I appreciate the hard work. Just want to put it on the radar for maybe the 3 department heads that will be have new positions proposed in the budget. If we could get a brief presentation at the Q&A or just an explanation on the benefit of those positions. Not saying I'm against them, just I think it's good for the public to know too what kind of services and how this will improve the quality of services we can provide the city of Minot. So just want to put that on the radar.
Mr. Mayor, Alderman Pittner, absolutely, we'll have that prepared and available for you.
Once again, thank you, Dave. That takes us to 9.2. This is an item that we've had some discussions here many years ago and in the not too distant future, and now we're going to resume a little bit of that discussion tonight. We do have the former landfill Superfund discussion. We do have our Assistant Public Works Director here. That is Mr. Jason Sorensen, who is going to give us a little bit of an overview, and then we're going to have some further discussion about, or actually he'll highlight some of that discussion with the Minot Park District. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening. Yeah, just like you said, this has been a conversation that's been going on, probably since about 2013 for the very first time, and there seemed to be a little more in-depth conversation starting about 16, and it's been kind of a slow rolling thing. So I'll just try to give you an update on what we're talking about and kind of where we're heading. So just a little history. The Superfund site was the City of Minot landfill between 1961 and 1971. About 1985, they started receiving complaints from the area. They had strong odors. You could see gas bubbles standing in water. It wasn't a very good situation. Led to a lot of studies and different investigations, which subsequently led to this old landfill being placed on the National Priorities List for the EPA in 1989, which then kicked off a bunch more studies. There's a consent decree, statement of work, remedial investigation, feasibility study, and then eventually we had a record of decision signed in 1993. There was a remedial action that was constructed in 1996, which consisted of a new landfill cap, basically just encasing the old landfill under about 3 or 4 feet of additional dirt. They put in a leachate collection system and drainage to draw off the groundwater to keep that water from bubbling to the surface. There's passive gas vents to vent off some of the gases that are created from the decomposition and things that are going on underground. And then the institutional controls to limit access, the fence, and then our city ordinances and those things. In 1997, this was then removed from the National Priorities List. We've done annual monitoring, groundwater monitoring. We do site investigations, and then the EPA comes up every 5 years to do a review. If you haven't seen it or don't know, this is where the location is. It's back behind Mesa Arena, the wide open space there. This is the flyer that the EPA put together back in 2013 as a potential for future reuse. We've been in discussions with the Minot Park District on and off over the past 5+ years. We discussed it pretty in depth with the EPA back in 2016, and I was part of those meetings, and it appeared to me to be a fairly simple process. And I think we've found out in the last 4 years that it's anything but we're making our way through it. The progress has been very slow, and it's been sporadic, But recently, I've had a lot of really good communications with the EPA, and we kind of have a path forward, it seems like, for now. So I'm just going to keep working on it and trying to get there. The main restrictions for reuse are they preclude any activities that could damage the landfill cap. That's really the main gist of the restrictions. That cap needs to stay in place and keep that stuff underground. This is a plan that the Park District put together. It consists of an 18-hole disc golf course. There's a series of mountain biking trails and some cross-country trails. I emailed out to all of you, I believe this afternoon, there's letters of support from some different organizations that support all these activities and the reasons why. Some pretty good benefits to the community, I think. So path forward. So basically, if you take the park's current plan, that's basically in violation of the current record of decision, which basically wants the thing kept isolated and nobody on it. So we can't be inviting people on and constructing things to invite people in until we go through some processes. And since it's a federal project, there's a whole alphabet soup of all kinds of abbreviations. We have the explanation of significant differences, which from what I understand is a document that was put in place because a remedial action is slightly different than what the regular decision said it should be. There's a statement of work and a consent decree. Our institutional controls, those are our city ordinances, and then an O&M plan, which is our operations and maintenance plan. So in order to get this all to fly and go through there, the EPA has an attorney, and he'll take a motion through the federal court setting out what we want to do with the park, and then the EPA's opinion on whether or not they think the remedy will remain protective. That's really it sounds like a pretty simple thing. But before we can do that, all the documents, the ESD, the ICs, and the O&M all have to be basically in a final draft form before he'll take it to court. So we're currently working on that. Additionally, since the North Dakota Department of Environmental Quality is the primacy agency for solid waste, we'll need an agreement with them that they're on board with our reuse plan, and then we're currently working on an MOU between the city and the Park District. So current status, the EPA is currently working on a draft ESD, and they're also drafting an agreement to satisfy the consent decree statement of work. I have submitted a really rough draft of an O&M plan to the EPA. I'll be having a meeting, a teleconference with them tomorrow to discuss whether or not I'm heading in the right direction or not. So we'll continue to work on that. We've looked at the city ordinances. They're pretty simple. I don't think that's a real big hurdle for us to get over. We'll draft some ordinances that make sense and bring them back to you all for eventual approval. And then the Park District will start working on an MOU. Once we have an idea what the operation and maintenance are going to require, some of that will get incorporated into the MOU. So we're maybe a little early on starting the MOU, but some of these discussions have started taking place. So this is the first time, like I said, I've been working on this for quite a few years. I have an email. The EPA said that they're planning on having the ESD signed no later than September 30th, which when I started seeing dates on paper, it seemed pretty neat. So like I said, there's stuff going on, and this is probably the most activity I've had going on now for probably a couple of years. So with that, I can stand for any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the update. I did have discussions with Park Director Mr. Merritt that is in attendance here as well. I'm highly supportive of getting this moving forward. Obviously, we have to move as quickly as the federal government sometimes, but certainly if there's any opportunity for the city or the council itself to weigh in, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. We'll get into questions, but to get this moving forward, because I look at this as a win. I think most people look at this as a very easy win for reuse of land without going against any of the issues that would damage the cap, but provide a quality of life multiplier for a lot of folks in the community very inexpensively. So look to that to questions for Mr. Sorensen. If not, I'm sorry, did you have anything else there?
Nope, that was it.
Okay.
Just thank you.
Hearkening back to not too long ago, I would almost, looking as we had all of these letters of support, and without seeming a bit too cheeky, but I would propose a resolution of support from the Minot City Council as well to getting this project complete as quickly as the federal government will allow us. Also in accordance with the rest of the folks that have sent us letters in support. And if that carries any extra weight with the EPA, I'm willing to make that motion of a resolution of support for city staff to work diligently with the EPA and press upon them that during these times of COVID, this is a great opportunity for us to get this moving. It's a very lengthy motion. I apologize.
Second.
We have a second from Alderwoman Evans. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, we have motion for support from Minot City Council. Please call the roll.
Sitma,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Janser,
Yes.
Olson,
Yes.
Pittner,
Yep.
Padragula,
Yes.
Ross.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to the end of our agenda. We are in line for adjournment.
So moved.
Motion by Alderwoman Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Janser. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. We're adjourned.
Paul Pittner.
Is now exiting.